we have this title, is it an opportunity for cooperation, or is it vice versa, area for competition? Competition. So this is what we're working with. Of course, the green agenda is very multifaceted. It opens a lot of opportunities for cooperation on the one hand and competition on the other. So what we are going to do is we'll have around, we'll all have 7 to 8 minutes to outline your key ideas, what you have to say. Then we'll have a few questions, and then we'll have a moderated session after that. So I think we'll use the same sequence as we did in Anton, Anton, you can work and explain to what is Russia's position on international cooperation. Are we going to Glasgow guns blazing, or anyway? Thank you. Giving the floor, and thank you. Now we can hear you well. Okay, so continue. I would like to thank the Portugal Foundation for organizing this event. This is truly a subject. We see more and more news around, and more parties get involved in the discussion. This discussion gets more and more complex. So what I'm going to do, as someone who works at the Multilateral Economic Cooperation Department, and I have to deal with a lot of international organizations, that more and more get involved in climate discussion. Climate change and digitization. These are the two things that everybody talks about. The UN plays the leading role in change. There are regional, industry-specific organizations. They all talk about climate change. There are bilateral, multilateral formats. Every time the matter of economic cooperation comes up, there is always a climate dimension to it. No matter what you talk about, education, transport, whatever, you name it, there's always the aspect of climate change. This just indicates how important the matter of climate change is. And as I get ready to this webinar, of course, you mentioned the title, and we would all love climate change to be a factor of unity, something that helps us work together and cooperate. But you're absolutely right that you have cooperation on the one hand, and there is always competition on the other. The matter of fighting climate change is positive, highly positive matter, and yet at times it is used to achieve some strategies for competitors. Of course, basically all the countries agree that we do need to fight climate change. It's pretty obvious, but once we get into details, it gets much more complex. The divisions emerging, because the rules that we are currently defining will largely shape the future of our economies. Because we're talking about much larger time periods when we discuss other areas of cooperation. We're talking about periods of 20, 30, 50, or even more years. So responsibility is really great when we discuss these matters and set the rules for the future, how we are going to fight climate change together, how we are going to protect the environment. What are we going to do about fossil fuels? What will be the role of fossil fuels in the future? What about nuclear energy? How do we make sure we have a just transition? What about that are affected not only by climate change, but also by the mitigation measures? What about international trade? All these matters are being discussed today as part of the Paris climate negotiations, other formats. I'm free to participate in this discussion today because those talks, those consultations mostly take place when it is nighttime in Moscow, basically during the day. Anyway, all these countries, they realize how these decisions are going to affect their future. Since this is a new topic, I guess you can say it's new.
Отстают в плане написания этих самых правил, по которым...
Multilateral institutes are lagging behind in terms of drafting the rules which everyone have to follow. And for instance, in the private sector,
их такое количество, что страны, что компании постоянно...
where certain norms and standards are available, the countries have to look for the standards which are more appropriate for them. It's very difficult for such companies to find some bearing in those multiple standards. And they have to actually bring about some common denominator. But this once again shows to us that we are too far away from having universal or versatile rules, and it will take some time before we bring up such a universal rules. So let me conclude my remarks with some economic views. We understand that most of the reasons of the climate situation we find ourselves in is due to the economic growth or how the economy develops. Addressing that problem depends on economy. Therefore, this problem rises so acutely. This is not just about environment, not about the climate, but this is about the low emission economy or low carbon development. We are speaking about kind of a decoupling between the development and greenhouse gases emissions. There is no way we can speak about decoupling, but at least we see some correlation between those two factors, and countries to try to address this factor. Once we speak about economy, once we speak about some external factors which all of a sudden become an important part of our economies, and for instance, we see the carbon prices emerging, it means that the emissions trade acquires all the features of a common market, the necessity for common standards, need for one regulator. Countries try to find a niche in this market. Some countries compete for not losing the market. And in that sense, certainly, for any state, including Russia, it is very valuable, it is very important to see what place it will take in this upcoming economy. It's very difficult to understand the shapes, the outlines of that economy. We have a certain development which we show at different international fora. We show how we see our trajectory for the development, bearing in mind the climate factors. We have a lot of proponents, those who understand our attitude towards this issue, which depends on our programs. And at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum and to the president, his address to the Federal Assembly, they all said that Russia associates itself with all efforts to combat greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. And the development should not be just green, but it has to be sustainable. These are the principles which have been endorsed by all the countries. And this is very much coupled with SDGs, and we have to maintain employment rate at a decent level. We have to provide for the living standards. We have to provide for healthcare, and we have to fight against energy poverty. And this is related somehow to greenhouse gases emissions mitigation. And certainly, our colleagues, they sympathize with this our approach. I think I spoke much longer than I was expected to, and I apologize for being spontaneous. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If I may, I have a quick question to you. The fact that the Russian economy and the Russian business adopted a similar statement that we have to deal with the green track, otherwise it will be too expensive and we're going to lose the market. But did the Russian companies understand, and the Russian economy in general, how it can benefit from that, where actually we can develop, where actually we may find some enthusiasm and not just fear? These are not just the companies who realize that. I think at least big global Russian companies which are present in the market, they realized that topic very well and several years ago. They are already acceding to these markets. They are working with the international regulations, just like any international company does. They try to find some competitive place. So there is an early competitors rule. So actually, there is a metaphor, meaning that the first comers may take the front seats in a row. There are companies which, for instance, one of our captains of industry, Rusal, which is implementing its international strategy less proactively than some of the countries. Rusal certainly realizes the importance of low-carbon aluminium. There are some agricultural firms which also realize the future of green agriculture and the potency of sustainable agriculture, which lie in future. Our companies not only think about how to protect themselves against negative impact, but they are promoting sustainable development. They get loans at reduced interest rates, provided the company meets certain sustainable development criteria. For them, this is an emerging market. In Russia, the taxonomy of green funding is only in its infancy, but the Russian companies are already working with international banks in that area. And therefore, I think that the companies take a very pragmatic approach. So once they see real opportunities, they are acceding to that market, and we're communicating to them, because this implies a lot of activities which I think we shan't be shy to showcase. And moreover, the companies are very proactive. They are getting prepared to transition to the sustainable development track, meaning that you do not have to push them, at least those who are working in the international markets. Others have to be promoted somehow, have to be supported, showing to them how it may be done. And we are ready to provide necessary support to them. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, it was a very optimistic view of the Russian companies and the Russian business, and something which we lack inaudible. And saying that, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Ferlenge, who in essence is a chairman of the Energy Committee and the Green Initiative Steering Group Association of European Business. Mr. Ferlenge, if we look at the Russian media, you won't see a lot of optimism about the green track promoted by Europe. At least there is not so much optimism compared to when we admired the European green regulations. At the moment, the exporters are very much concerned about how the Green Deal of the EU may impact their activity, may impact cooperation between Russia and the EU member states. Are there any reasons to be optimistic? As far as Russia is one of the biggest energy partners of the European Union, and Russia, as you know, is getting integrated into the green track. So who the European Union is to cooperate in that green agenda? Thank you so much, Anastasia. Thank you so much to all the participants, and thank you so much for your invitation. Whether it is interesting for business or not, I would say that we have 3,000 signatories to United Nations principle. If we look and we compare that to 2019, we see 40% increase in the funds which are investing into ESG principles. Actually, 360 billion euro has been invested into the companies which committed themselves to ESG, and soon this figure would reach the figure of 600 billion. So it means ESG criteria compliance is estimated at 1.3 trillion US dollars. All the markets are moving in that direction. In Russia, step by step, people are understanding that. And the Russian railways issued their first green bonds a couple of weeks ago, I think. The city of Moscow issued bonds, and everyone is moving in that direction. What result are we going to achieve? My perception, and probably I will take your previous question, why the companies have to do that. Russia, amid the COVID, it was a big advantage, a big state-owned enterprise. And certainly, COVID affected all the economies of the world. And Russia withstood that strike because the Russian economy is connected to major state-owned enterprise. Russia is short of SMEs all over the world. SMEs actually account for 90%, and in Russia, actually, the bulk of the economy depends on the big companies, and you'd rather help big companies rather than 90% of small, medium-sized enterprises. The second stage is about improving the energy efficiency. But most importantly, what Russia still is perceiving as an integral part of the whole process. This is how you improve the competitiveness of the companies. You invest in the green economy and you upgrade your technological fleet. That means that you're more energy efficient and you're more competitive. There are no dramatic changes. For instance, in the Netherlands, a week ago, you remember what happened? The Dutch court stated, made a ruling that within the Paris Agreement, the commitments embrace not only the countries but also the companies which are registered there. Russia has adopted two laws, is about to adopt two laws. The State Duma passed in the second reading the law, which will stipulate for environmental monitoring to understand who emits how much. The second law is about Sakhalin region. We'll speak about energy transition. We'll also embrace other very relevant topics. Who is going to pay for that? Because the energy transition and improving energy efficiency costs some money. At the moment, we'll say that in 2010, carbon neutrality was a buzzword, and we believe that it would be very easy, but this is not true. We made our maths. Well, actually, it would cost us $1.5 trillion a year. Why we need so much money? Because 40% of the technologies which are needed in order to achieve carbon neutrality are non-existent yet. So it means that we have to invent them, to come up with them. And these technologies, inventing them, this would require lots of money, and it would require R&D. Actually, in Russia, R&D enjoys the investments of about $20 million a year. In the United States and in the EU, this figure is 0 times bigger. Russia obtains about 15,000 new patents, including new technology. The United States and China would obtain about 1 million patents, and you see the difference between 15,000 and 1 million patents. And you may monetize on that, capitalize on that. So this topic is quite hard, but it would require putting our efforts together in Europe. We felt that finances play a big role there. In Europe, once you ask, how would you benefit from that, from these new processes, from the upgrading, the European businessman would say, I love green trade because I would obtain long-term and cheap loans, 1% interest rate for 30 years. Therefore, everyone is ready to install solar panels and buy electric vehicles, and people will not pay property taxes, and income taxes are quite low. Without subsidies, this process will never be launched. But we came up to that understanding when we invested $70 million dollars into the renewables, but Russia is not subsidizing that industry. Therefore, 1 kilowatt hour through solar panels would cost about $2,000, whereas in Europe it would cost 400 euro. So subsidies promote progress in that area. Otherwise, there would be lots of risks, technological risks, and because the market is new. Therefore, we have to understand that there is a big potential room for expanding cooperation between Russia and Europe. It has been free of sanctions. As far as we are moving in the same direction, we are aiming at the same target to minimize the greenhouse gas emissions. I think that there is a big room for cooperation. Also, Russia has ample resources of forest, and forest is one of the key components of our environmental system. Politically, we'll have to take advantage of that. If you look at, I recommend to you to read the report of IEA, International Energy Agency, which predicted how much coal, gas, and oil would be consumed. We know that coal is going down, oil actually is going down, but not so strongly. But renewables, this is a competitive age. You may generate power from renewables, and it would be cheaper than any other fossil fuels. I said that 30% of renewables in Europe. This is thanks to these subsidies. These are competitors. Who is investing into that becomes the leader of the future. Let's have a look at Russia. Russia is lagging behind. Russia is still lacking a monitoring system for emissions. The emissions certificate trading started many years ago. Therefore, at St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, we saw that the number of roundtables dedicated to greenhouse was more numerous than the ones dedicated to oil and gas. And besides, I organized there a couple of greenhouses emissions roundtables, bring together many high-ranking officials. We spoke about regulations, we spoke about funding. Certainly, Russia has to move forward and has to do that very quickly. All over the world, we see the rise in the investments into the renewables. 328 million rubles have been invested into the oil discoveries and exploration. I didn't touch the question of cross-border environmental tax, but you have to make up with that. This is an extra tax that Europe is going to introduce, and I don't have any doubts about that. And you know that it will hit the metallurgy, and it will also hit the cement manufacturers, and Russia is one of the major exporters of that. Actually, there are different estimates as to how much this tax would cost them. The predictions range from $2 billion to $5 billion. But once again, if we take the European experience, if we look at the greenhouse gas emissions per capita in Europe, it has dropped. It has dropped. It used to be 8 tons per capita a year per annum. Over 16, 17 years, it dropped from 8 to 6.5 tons. In Russia, the greenhouse gas emissions increased. I'm speaking about CO2 emissions per capita. Therefore, we have to do some work. We need investments. We need a new industrial policy. We have new green agriculture. We have to refit the power generation industry, and the Ministry for Economic Development is working on that strategy. Thank you so much, and apologize for speaking too long. Thank you so much. That was a very interesting topic. Let me ask one quick question, if I may, concerning the green track being implemented in Europe. Euronews, my favorite TV channel, publishes some videos that in Western Europe it is perceived very optimistically, but it is very much detached from the realities of coal-run power plants. And some European countries are very much dependent on the coal supplies. What mechanisms would Brussels propose once it is interested in the green track? What can be done in order to remove these obstacles? Well, thank you so much, Anastasia. Well, in essence, in Europe, we don't see any single business. I'm not speaking about the ones which are using energy. I'm speaking about the commitments taken by the industry in general. We understand that Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 implies certain commitments in general. And we are living by our own obligations. For instance, we burn gas to generate power, and we commit ourselves to some obligations for the contractors as well. A common trend for Europe is that any supply would be allowed to the tender once it meets certain parameters or requirements. Dirty ones would not be allowed to. Why? Because actually the country is subsidizing green track, and you have to upgrade your technological fleet. The main driver is money. Out of 7 years of the next budget, 1.8 trillion euro, 638 or 33% of money would be earmarked to the industries which are ready to upgrade for the sake of green economy. Only then they would get cheap long-term loans. Others would have to somehow take the conventional expensive loans. So secondly, you will be able to become competitive. And corporate governance system would change, whether this is a state-owned enterprise or a private enterprise. All the companies feel some pressure. For instance, the regulator would say that this project should meet these or that parameters. Otherwise, it won't be approved. It doesn't depend on the Paris agreements. It would depend on the priorities that the company, for instance, or the country would embark on. The young generation is ready to pay 1% more in terms of the price per gallon of gas if it is a green gasoline. no one actually would spare 1 cent extra in order to pay for green gasoline. And for instance, in Europe, some elements would be actually sold with a discount to Russia because Russia doesn't have any CO2 strict emissions. The polluter pays principle is intact. Who is more dirty would pay more. So we're still missing the certificate trading system. So in 2 years, actually, these trade turnover would amount to about 90 million. So, and in future, it would be more profitable to invest into the industry. Thank you so much. I think that there is a lot of food for contemplation, including the information for the Russian Ministry for Economic Development. The funds are playing a different role compared to the European countries, but still, that's a question of monitoring and emissions, taking stock of carbon agriculture strategy was supported at the top level. There are pilot projects in Sakhalin region show that Russia is really moving in that direction. And that was quite an interesting statement. Thank you. Saying that, I would like to a little bit divert from our topic and to make a pivot to the east. Mr. Liao, China put forward very ambitious goals in its green agenda, moving them compared to delaying them 10 years, but in the 14th five-year plan, the green agenda is very much pronounced. What are the key priorities of China in that area? What countries could become allies for China in that Green Deal? And what countries are perceived by China as a barrier on the way to implement the green priorities? Or there are no such countries? Over to you.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to thank the fund for supporting this event. Thank for previous speakers for their wonderful speech. So it's my honor to make a presentation here. So first of all, I focus on China's action. So in September and December of 2020, President Xi promised the world that China will improve its national contribution to climate change in the UN, General Assembly and the ambitious climate summit, and strive to achieve carbon peaks in 2030 and the carbon neutralization in 2060. So our actions are as follows. First, bring the carbon peak and the carbon neutralization into the overall layout of ecological civilization construction. So, and the economic and the society will be transformed to green and low carbon comprehensively. So the first, and the second, so we put the first priority on energy efficiency and the clean energy use. By 2030, the carbon intensity will be reduced by 65%. The proportion for non-fossil energy will reach 25%, and the total installed capacity for wind power and solar power generation will be more than 1,200 gigawatt. And the third, so we change our industry structure. As you know, so everybody is know that made in China. So then we have to shift our industry structure from heavy chemical industry and high energy consumption industry to green industry, green construction, green transportation, so on. So and the fourth, so we try to improve Chinese ecosystem carbon sink capacity through forest resources and ocean blue carbon to capture the carbon emissions, and also so by 2030, the forest volume will be increased by 6 billion cubic meters compared with 2005. And five, we also capture, and fifth, we try to capture and store the synchronized carbon emissions at the source of carbon, such as power plants, chemical plants by CCU technology. So the last one is to promote green and low carbon consumption model. Last must be electrified, clean, intelligent, and market oriented. So the transportation.
Mr. Lau, unfortunately, we cannot see your presentation. Can you share your presentation? If you want to show the presentation, you have to share the screen.
Okay, so I just speak out, and now so as I said, we have six steps to achieve this 30-60 target for carbon. And now second, so I focus on the relation, the cooperation between Russia and China. So we do have one strong cooperation. We do have a strategic partnership with between Russia and China. So in 2014, under the witness of President Xi and President Putin, China and Russia signed a gas purchase and a signing contract for the eastern route of China and Russia with a total value of more than $400 billion US dollars, and dollars, and annual gas supply of 38 billion cubic meters with the duration of 30 years. So this is so facilitate liquefied natural gas projects. This is first, and second, so we can build up biomass power generation plants. So in China, we mainly use coal to generate the power, which accounts for more than 58%. If we mix biomass to generate power, that is very helpful. So Russia is rich in forest resources. Maybe we can cooperate in this field. So the third expectation is that to develop hydrogen and nuclear energy, because so we can cooperate in technology. So after reducing natural gas use, so maybe you may know that. So China's demand for LNG has been increasing. So China also has a coal to gas policy for heating in winter. So then as to Russia, the total liquefied capacity reached over 80 million tons. So per year, I'm not sure this number. Anyway, so this number still could not meet the imports from China. So this is my first focus for cooperation between Russia and China for LNG. So basically, in summary, so we at least we have 4 areas to cooperate between Russia and China. First is the LNG, and the second is biomass, and third is hydrogen and nuclear energy, so on. So the potential for cooperation is huge between Russia and China. So that's it. So I do have PPT. So actually, I sent the PPT to to your fund by email. So then you can also share my PPT with all colleagues. So this so that's it. That's my opinion. So.
Большое спасибо, господин Liao. Мы обязательно попросим
Thank you, Mr. Liao. We will definitely make sure that the Gorchakov Foundation shares your slides with others. If I may, I would like to ask you a very short question before we move on. In earlier years, China paid a lot of attention to the Belt and Road Initiative. So I would like to ask you, do you think that the Belt and Road Initiative will become greener? Are we going to see some green belts going forward?
So I can't hear you very clear. So say that again.
Можем ли мы ожидать...
My question was, can we expect to see green belts and roads?
Okay.
Seeing that China is taking the green road now, and
yes. So China initiated one Belt, one Road. So like 10 years. I forgot exactly, like 10 years ago. So several years ago. So yes. So the strategy is green. So first we called we built a high speed train. So high speed train. So with electricity. So almost so in China. So we are trying to use electricity car to replace traditional gasoline, even gasoline car. So then we try to high speed train along the one road, one belt, and with electricity. So the key point is that so the electricity comes from factory plants, and the plants have to use green materials like biomass. So before, as I said, so we use the coal to generate electricity. That is kind of indirect carbon emission, source of carbon emission. So now we're trying to use the gasoline. Use the natural gas to replace coal to generate electricity, and as a transition. Later on, we'll try to use so as I said, we use hydrogen and nuclear energy to generate electricity. And so later on, we do have ambitious 5 plan from 2020 2025, and also have the otherwise. So as we promised, to achieve 30-60 target of carbon emission. So my answer is are you satisfied with my answer?
Большое спасибо. Ответ действительно очень амбициозный.
Thank you very much. It is indeed an ambitious plan. Since Russia is an important partner for Russia, it is really important for us to understand where Beijing is going. So now we are going to start a general discussion. If I may, I would like to ask a general question. We have some technical difficulties with our American expert. He cannot get connected. Let me ask you a provocative question. We talk a lot about green cooperation. Can we expect that countries would be ready to take the next step? And in the matter of sanctions, and we have new sanctions coming in all the time, would it be possible to introduce what you might call green indulgences for countries running green programs like US and European countries will make some exceptions in their sanctions, or we will have more green sanctions. Recently, a new green sanctions bill was introduced in the US Congress by Texas Congresswoman, a Democrat, suggesting sanctions for destructive activities for climate. Of course, this is just a bill, but what are we likely to see? Green indulgences or green sanctions within the next 3 to 5 years? I would ask all the participants to answer this question one by one. Please tell us what you think about this. And how will the green agenda affect our international relations? Let's follow our regular order. Let's start with Anton. Okay, let me try to answer this question. It's indeed a very provocative question. You know, we know from the last 2 years that you can politicize anything. It all depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to achieve some political goal using economic instruments for this purpose, or if your goal is to support your own domestic manufacturers, there is always a way. You can always find an excuse. You can always find a way. So, I think the very fact that the world is more aware of the green agenda today, well, this just adds another option for the people who are eager to impose sanctions on others. But basically, the goal remains the same. If you want to impose sanctions on another country, you will always find a way, and there will always be one way or another to do that. Now, you also mentioned the idea of indulgences. I think basically it's the same. Sanctions and indulgences, these are two sides of the same coin. Mr. Ferlengi talked about money. He said, money talks. Money is the decisive factor. And we'll see how countries act going forward. For example, we know in Russia, we can easily reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It will be cheaper than in the EU because we have a lot of opportunities with our forestation or optimizing our industry. There are many ways, many things we could do. So if an investor can reduce emissions in some other country more efficiently, they will do this, of course. Carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases, they're not aware of borders, so it doesn't really matter where you are going to reduce emissions. You reduce emissions in the place where it can be done most effectively, most efficiently. If there are some other non-economic reasons for doing something different, for example, if we see other countries ignoring Russia with its opportunities, we will know that there are some political motives behind it, because economic factors are all in favor of doing environment projects in Russia. But the situation definitely affects the distribution of competitive advantages around the world. So there are certain countries who are trying to change this situation in a way that they think is fair. So I totally agree with you that this It's not the best way. Mr. Ferlengi, what about you? Do you think we are likely to have politicization of the green agenda, or on the contrary, it will play positive role? Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you now. I was going to say these are some global problems, and global problems need global solutions. No doubt about that. If we take the COVID-19 pandemic as an example, we saw that no country was able to deal with these problems on their own. Likewise, with the green agenda, it is impossible, it is inconceivable that let alone imposing sanctions, creating barriers, limiting technological development, technological potential for other countries. So I think that the green agenda should be sanction-free. There should be no sanctions involved. This is completely out of the question. Like I said, there are some obligations, some investment that needs to be made. 40% of non-existent technology, and not just technology, we are talking about other kinds of fuel that we can use today. You mentioned hydrogen. This is a whole new world, a lot of new opportunities. And human capital. This is what we have a lot of in Russia. At this point, we don't have a lot of skills, a lot of competencies available around the world on green technology. So we need this kind of dialogue between different countries around the world. There should be no competition of one country against the other. I think we need a new international fund where each country will make a contribution to this international fund, and this fund will invest money in developing new green technology. It would be nice to have something similar on COVID, a global international institute developing new vaccines, new treatment for COVID-19. Because currently, there are 3 vaccines available in the US, all invented by private companies. And then there are some vaccines in Russia. Those were produced by government centers. And there are some vaccines available in China as well. And those were also developed by government institutions, government research centers. So I think what we need is cooperation, working together. So I don't want to think about sanctions on green matters. Thank you. Well, the very idea of having a Paris investment fund, it's a very good idea. And given the current economic situation around the world, I think this is a very promising idea.
Can be done through the green programs, as far as I understand the European Commission for the next budgetary cycle. But still, there are differences on that question, and more often they are heard in the international area. Mr. Liao, do you think that the green track can become a tool of competitiveness or competition, especially between China and the United States, or on the contrary, it would be an area of friendship?
That's a good question. So I totally agree with the previous 2 speakers. So greenhouse gas emissions are global issues. So we cannot solve it by just two countries. So just show muscle to fight each other. So in the short run, I say, so in short run, maybe they use the sanction or green barrier to reduce import from Chinese products. As you know, China has all kinds of industry sanctions, so from shoes to machines, so on. So in short run, maybe they can reduce some trade, but in the long run, they cannot still solve this global issue, cannot solve it. So the best way is to transfer green technology from developed countries to developing countries. So this is transfer green technology, and also the second suggestion is to promote investment. So investment in green industries and the green transformation field for green recovery, for example. So we can, there are many ways like CDM, CCER mechanism. So like carbon tradable market, green bond, green fund, so on. So for example, by 2030, about 75% of the Asian Development Bank's financial projects will support green development. That is a good way. So that is a good way to solve a global issue related to carbon emissions. So okay.
Большое спасибо.
Thank you so much. I get more questions, and if I may, I'd like to launch another round of questions, a common question for all the participants in the discussion. What Russia, as a major stakeholder in the green agenda, green track, can offer to the international partners? Some of the parameters have already been mentioned. Russia has rivers, fields, and forests. But this idea that it would be beneficial to decrease greenhouse gas emissions, where it can be done very easy, and this is very tempting for the Russian economy. My question goes to Anton. Does Russia welcome that idea? And does Europe see as a welcome supplier of green assets or not? Well, thank you so much, Anastasia. Well, a lot's been said about the fact that Russia can give a lot, such as hydrogen, forests. Russia also possesses of a huge innovative potential, green potential, and for instance, low emission innovations. This is what Russia can offer. This is one of the questions where the opinions vary or split. We do believe that the potential of the nuclear power is huge in order to reduce emissions, but not everyone agrees that this is a clean energy. This is one of the things which we keep discussing. As concerns whether Russia is welcome there, well, we perceive that Russia is very much welcome in Europe. Russia is big emitter of greenhouse gases, that's for sure, but at the same time, Russia has some political clout, political impact. Therefore, it may promote our leadership in how the global transition to the sustainable development will take place. Therefore, Russia's clout, Russia's impact is appreciated. What we discussed today already has been discussed at different international fora. Our voice is heard, but we try to speak even louder, especially against the backdrop. I cannot but praise myself, or rather my ministry, saying that the development of infrastructure, metal industry development, for instance, and climate issues, they take priority positions. This development is totally unprecedented. This progress allows us to speak from strength at the international fora, that we could be heard, for instance, even if we speak about green projects, taxonomy, which are being designed for the documents which would be used in order to identify whether the project is green enough in order to enjoy investments. I think that, in essence, such Russian documents are very close, in essence, to the European documents. It enables us to speak about the potential of further development of our potential. And we have to set up very tight bonds between investors and companies. The private sector should have all the necessary infrastructure and all the necessary means in order to take advantage of all the opportunities which pop up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Frelenge. Well, I think it's very difficult for me to add something to what I've already said. Okay. Mr. Liao.
Yeah.
Why China introduced a Green Week? Green Week.
Okay. China. We can say from international perspective, China wants to be a responsible country in this world. So, and then also inside, we want to change, transform our economic model totally and comprehensively. This is why we try to seek green track in China, and also we try to seek cooperation with international communities, particularly with Russia. So I think Russia is does have advantage and huge potential for green truck. So as I said before, so not only China, even for Japan and South Korea, we also they also need a huge they have a huge demand for LNG projects. And also Russia cannot meet imports from China, Japan, and South Korea for LNG. So then it's clean energy. So this is the first priority, at least for 30 years. So which can create employment, increase economic growth, so on. So that is absolutely is double win projects while reducing carbon emissions. So this is the first priority. So second, so as I said, so we can, so you have Russia has the advantage of biomass to generate electricity. So this is a huge potential. And also you do have advantage of green technology such as hydrogen and the nuclear power. So if we can, so cooperation is the key for both countries. So my expectation is that Russia turn a little bit from Europe to East Asian countries like China. So then you have create lots of green employment, increase your GDP and so on. So it's absolutely is double or triple wins with projects and huge potential markets. As you know, basically, so all the economy between Russia and China are complementary. So it's not a substitute; it's a complementary. So the green track or green development between two countries benefits two countries, I think. That's my expectation.
Спасибо большое. Ну, я хочу только
Thank you
обратить
so much. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that our coat of arms is a double-headed eagle. So meaning that the eagle faces both the east and the west. And I hope that we can implement very interesting green projects with our European partners and with China and other Asian nations. Moreover, as we heard today, there are lots of such opportunities. To conclude our remarks, I'd like to ask a very brief question to everyone. What do you think, until the end of this year, until the year 2021, the first post-COVID or semi-COVID year, what would be the most important solutions or platforms to promote green track until December? Will these be some forums or national development plans or some plans of the development institutes? What do you expect as positive messages stating that the green track would get an impetus? Well, I think that the answer is obvious. On the one hand, everyone is looking forward to a conference in Glasgow. We expected that the negotiations would somehow result in adopting the Article 6. It certainly will be helpful to create the carbon markets and help countries achieve their goals. In terms of SDGs, the climate or green track certainly would be a priority on the agenda of G20. There would be very first meeting in summer, assistant summit in autumn. Last year, the climate agenda was quite important. It remains important this year as well. But we expected that out of the mechanisms which would be proposed this year, I spoke about that, and Mr. Ferlengi spoke about that. That's the emissions law and Sakhalin pilot project, sustainable funding, and there is a number of other mechanisms and instruments which would boost green track in Russia. I think that we can just showcase what we are doing at the international forums, how we make our input into solving that problem. Mr. Ferlengi? Well, I would like to say that on average, the companies of the world and the countries of the world certainly were affected by COVID-19, and the indebtedness increased. Everyone knew that the green agenda, green track was a key one in the framework of sustainable development as a culture. But everyone realizes that different countries and different companies saw their debt increased 30 to 40%. Well, once the leverage or indebtedness goes up 15%, small and medium-sized enterprises may go bankrupt. I think that we have to show some solidarity not only between the companies, but between different nations and companies. And besides, as concerns Russia, we worked on one project, setting up a new portal, which, in my opinion, should bring together different academia and universities of the Russian Federation and the European nations. In general, I think that we can expand that program. New academia, new universities would accede to the program, committing themselves to set up a new green program. This is necessary in order to train workforce, unique workforce, which would have certain green competences at the moment. There are quite few such workforce, little workforce, which would possess of such potential. I think that this potential can be exercised in Russia. Economic recovery is needed. We all believe that the main agenda is about economic recovery, but the climate agenda should have to be equally important. As you know, Russia and Turkey are two countries of the world which, until today, have not yet taken any commitments until 2050. So Russia is signatory to Paris Agreement, but there are no commitments regarding 2050. So we're still expecting some commitments from Russia concerning 2050. I think that we have to come up with some single portal, one-stop shop approach, which could be used by foreign partners who were going to invest in the green projects in Russia. This one-stop shop approach could present a comprehensive approach once the foreigners come to Russia and say, for instance, would like to bring about a project, design and implement certain projects or technologies. Russia is geographically vast. There are different regions and there are different visions. Sakhalin pilot project is followed by Yekaterinburg, by Kazan, Tatarstan. Different regions set up different strategies, which adds to a healthy competition. The region which is most ambitious in its plans should benefit from that, in my opinion. And for that, we have to add transparency. It means that we have to localize production, and localization of manufacturing would take place only once investors are clear of what investment programs are to be implemented. For instance, the Moscow region is going to buy 4,000 new electric buses, 4.3 kilometers of new metro stations. These are infrastructural projects, and this is one of the key topics in the green agenda. Therefore, we have a lot of room for improvement, and this is being discussed by politicians, by the decision makers. The civil society in Russia is now perceiving Green Deal or Green Track as an advantage. There are certain risks, and we have to find some balance, especially for the Russian exporters. Don't forget that 40% of the Russian budget depends on export of fossil fuel, oil and gas. And in terms of the volume of oil and gas exported does not change, but certainly the fluctuation in the crude prices impacts the people's income. So there should be some diversification, and green track is clearly very important. I was speaking about the coordination between our countries. We are developing a new strategy. The strategy is being developed by the Ministry for Economic Development. Web.rf plays a special role there. A lot of banks, for instance, Gazprom Bank, a traditional bank which was involved in funding oil and gas and coal projects, over the last year and a half, is investing heavily into renewables, solar power, wind power, and that's a unique wind power project in the north. So there are heavy winds there. You have very reliable, high voltage grid, and this cheap energy can be supplied to any country, to all the regions. Provided we don't have any barriers, you could even export that. there might be some losses, but this is a matter of integrating our networks. Once we speak about Russia and Europe, and with no offense to our Chinese colleagues, but I perceive Russia as part of Europe. We are a single continent. Russia and Europe, we have 60 years of friendly relations, trade and investments, and we are very grateful to Europe for what Russia did in terms of supplying oil and gas.
They did not just save the world during World War II. They also saved the European economy, saved a lot of resources. So going forward, we should influence politicians in our country, telling them that Russia and Europe can do a lot of things together. Thank you very much. I totally agree with you. I think we'll have a task for the green agenda soon, since we have the debt crisis and employment crisis looming in many countries. So let's just hope that countries, corporations, international organizations working together will not reduce the green agenda to empty declarations. Instead, they will use this resource for overcoming these crises. Let me just add a few words. If you take children who are school students today, 60% of these school students, 60% of them in 20 years, what are they going to do? We need to reinvent the world for those kids. Like I said earlier, we should invest in human capital, universities, education. This is the most important thing. I firmly believe this. Well, we're on the same page. I totally agree with you. And hopefully, our university will launch a new master's program on the green economy starting next year. And we think it will be highly successful because we have a large number of college students who are interested in the green agenda. To them, this is something new, something very appealing, something where there are a lot of opportunities. To them, this is not a heavy burden, a heavy task, something that they just need to do. So let's work for our young people. Our young people want to live in a greener world, in a cleaner world. And of course, we should pay special attention to the areas that may be left out. We have some parts of Russia that heavily depend on oil and gas, and they may face some difficulties because of unemployment going forward. And I think the Russian government has a lot of things it will have to do to combine these two things. On the one hand, promote the green agenda, and at the same time, social support. Mr. Liao, what about China? What are your expectations for the green agenda?
So I totally agree with what you said. In 2021, so my first expectation is to facilitate LNG projects for between Russia and China. Actually the LNG project started in June 2015 from the Sino-Russia border through Heilongjiang province to city Shanghai, over 3,000 kilometers long. So you can say, so this project is very important. So in China in 2001, so yesterday we established a national carbon tradable market after several years trial and by trial and error. So online yesterday. So you can say, and also so as I said before, so I don't remember exactly. Actually, in the total installed capacity for wind power and solar power generation will be more than 1,000 gigawatt. in 2021. So in China, you can, and also we set up a target for 2030. The proportion for non-fossil energy will reach 25%. So that's it. Actually, I totally agree with what you said. So for green agenda, like investment in education, in next generation, so on. I totally agree with that.
Большое
That's it.
спасибо.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank all of our speakers, and I would like to thank the Gorchakov Foundation for organizing this discussion. I think this was a very important conversation, maybe the first conversation in a series of conversations that we need to have with other countries as well, India, African countries, Asian countries. So hopefully this dialogue will continue. So if you have any questions that you did not have time to ask during our discussion, send them into the Gorchakov Foundation and we'll send them to forward them to speakers. Victoria, back to you now. I hope we did a good job. Yes. Once again, I would like to thank all the experts. Thank you very much for finding the time to join us today. We really hope that our cooperation will continue. Anastasia, thank you very much. You were a very good moderator, very professional. Thank you for making the time to join us today and organize this event. Also, I would like to say a special thank you to our interpreters who worked with us today. The recording of this event, we'll keep the recording. And you can also read a report about this discussion later on social media. Thank you all very much once again. Thank you and see you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.